Good morning. This is Wilhelmina. What I'm going to read you this morning are some of my stories from southeast Iowa. Jerry and I lived in southeast Iowa for 4 complete years, from November 1986 to January 1991. I did a fair amount of writing while I was there, and these stories from southeast Iowa follow another collection that I made called Letters from Heaven, which I haven't read for years, but I may get into someday. So let's begin. July 5th, 1990. The hollyhocks have grown up by the side of the garage, and they're gorgeous this year. They're almost up to the roof, and the blossoms are rosy pink and deep pink. Today, I may sit to write by the wall of hollyhocks, where I can watch the wrens coming and going into the little house that hangs off the spruce tree. Or I may go down the stone steps in the bank to where the vegetable garden is and sit by the row of raspberries. Or I may go farther, into the gully below the railway tracks, where the sun is filtering through the leaves of the shrubby trees. The gully is a wild place. Yes, I'm going into the gully. Now, the first story that I have to tell you is called The Snake. A few years ago, I was starting my Iowa garden, and I was hoping to attract a snake or two. The offbeat garden book I was reading that year assured me that snakes were gardeners' friends. Snakes didn't eat vegetables, the book said, but they did consume large quantities of insects that did eat vegetables. The plot at the back of the yard, where I was digging out sod, happened to be on top of a couple of feet of fill brought in from the foundry across town, where Walter Dabner, who built our house, used to work. I believe what they made over there were washing machines. I was happy with my garden because the spot was level and the sun was on it for most of the day, and because my offbeat gardening book was so keen on teaching me how to stay in tune with nature that it did not have a chapter about the dangers of growing food on soil contaminated with hazardous waste and heavy metals. As I dug through the ashy rubble, I found bricks and red clay tiles and cement blocks and huge black cinders. I tossed these in a heap on the grassy bank that led from the back of the yard up to the house. As I watched my heap grow, I wondered how I could turn the rubble pile into a resource. I began to think it would be nice if a little striped garter snake would settle down to raise a family there, so that the offspring could feed themselves on my squash bugs, my field mice, my aphids, and my Colorado potato beetles. We've been living in southeast Iowa for nearly 4 years. We've walked along all the trails in most of the state parks. For the past 3 spring seasons, we've been tramping through Farmer Ruggles' pastures plural, to the north of town, searching for birds' nests. The pastures are large, with trees and creeks and hedgerows and tall weeds and open spaces. There are plenty of mice in the pastures. The mice have been making their nests in Jerry's bluebird boxes that he put up there. But we haven't ever seen a snake. Jerry and I were part of a bird study there, classifying birds, nesting, see which kinds were nesting. The farmers around here use a lot of chemical fertilizers and pesticides on their corn and soybeans, and this is hard on the wildlife. Perhaps that's why we hadn't seen any snakes in Ruggles' pasture. Or maybe the snakes have been hiding from us. I don't know. Anyhow, I did a funny thing this spring. I read of someone else doing this in my offbeat gardening book. I went into the backyard one morning, and I made a declaration to the wildlife. I invited them to share our space with us. Our space is only a narrow city lot, but it's on a dead-end street, and there's the Burlington Northern right-of-way behind us, and there's an empty weedy lot next door. So I said, lovers of wildlife live on this property. I said it right out loud. Come on in, bring your friends, you're welcome here. I have 2 neighbors down on the corner, elderly ladies, Sadie and Helen, who come to get me when they need a little help around their place. One day Sadie, who is 87, said to me, I get moles in my yard, but I put a little pill down the hole and that fixes them. Sadie's yard may get fixed, but I think the moles get broken. Wherever can they go to root through the soil and keep the grub population in check and live their lives in peace? So, what I said in my declaration was, y'all come. Just had to scroll down there. 1 week after my declaration day, Jerry and I were sitting in the swinging chair he had made under the big maple tree in the front yard, having cucumber sandwiches for lunch. It was a warm day. After lunch, Jerry said, let's have an ice cream cone, and I said, sure, I'll go. And I came dashing over to come in the front door. We have a small porch there, 4 cement steps going up, and then a cement landing, and then we go into the house. As I hopped up onto the landing and reached for the screen door, I saw, lying along the crack where the house meets the landing, the biggest snake I have ever seen in my life. Now I'm 75 years old, and it's still the biggest snake I ever saw in my life. It was all of 5 feet long, and it was stretched out as straight as a yardstick, without a curve in it anywhere. It surprised me to see the snake there. Surprised the hell out of me. I jumped back off the landing, took a second to gather my wits, and I said, hey, Jerry, come on over here. I've got something to show you. He came. The snake hadn't moved a muscle, hadn't blinked an eye. We stood at a respectful distance and had a good gander at it. The neck was turned, so the head faced us. But I don't think the snake saw us. It might have been snoozing. The head was triangular shaped, and it looked too small to be able to swallow enough food to sustain the thick body that went along with it. The long slit of the mouth curved up at the sides, as though the snake was smiling at us. Jerry said, handsome specimen, isn't it? The snake was a light buffy brown with patches of deep, rich, rusty color along its back. These patches were in the shape of irregular circles and were bordered in black. I said, yeah, I wonder how it got up on the landing. Either it must have come up the steps, or else straight up onto the brick planter in front of the living room window and along that way. Soon we had seen everything we wanted to. You can only stare at a sleeping snake for so long, and then you have to get on with your life. I went around to the side door and went in that way to get the ice cream cones, and I got them. And we had them, and when we finished them, we wanted seconds. On my next trip into the house, I made a wide circuit around the front porch. No snake. I walked out to the center of the cement driveway. There was the snake, winding along the side of the house. I watched it as it snuggled into a little spot of shade where the steps go up to the sliding doors of the family room towards the back of the house. I went into the house and I got the ice cream out of the freezer, and then I thought, oh my, the garage door is wide open. I ought to run out and pull it down. I dashed out the kitchen door and ran over and reached up for the handle of the garage door, and as I did, I glanced inside the shady garage, and I saw that I was too late. It was in there already, inside the garage, and heading for the shade under the workbench. So, I made her ice creams doubles. When I gave Jerry his, I said, "I hate to tell you this, honey, but when you're going to work in the morning, you should check under the truck before you get in it. You might have company." That evening, I wanted to weed the turnips. The hoe was in the garage, hanging from the side wall. I went to the middle of the driveway. I got down on my hands and knees and I peered into the garage and under the truck. Nothing there. I went inside, and I kept away from the row of black garbage bags along the black wall. I got my hoe, and I went out to the garden. After a while I called into the family room, where Jerry was practicing his recorder. "Hey, Jerry, come on out here. There's a bug I want you to see." He came. And after we had looked at the bug, I took him on a garden tour to show him how my Vates kale leaves were getting big enough to crinkle around the edges, and to show him how the Jerusalem artichokes were springing up so tall. Then I let him go back to his recorder, and I thinned the radishes. When we were getting ready for bed that night, Jerry said, "I hate to tell you this, honey, but when I came out to the garden, I forgot to slide the screen door shut on the door to the family room. It was open for about half an hour." Well, that snake was on my mind for quite a few days this spring. But I think my snake story is over. We haven't seen it again, either in the gully, or in the garden, or in the garage, or in the basement. I went over to the library one day to see if I could find a name for it, but I didn't find one. The reptile books were in the stacks upstairs. What I learned was that I could not bear to slip my fingers into a snake book without peeking first to see what was coiled in there. And I also learned that I could only touch an illustrated page on the corners. I have donated my Offbeat Garden book to the library book sale, and I have recently made a new declaration to my wildlife. This time I did not say, "Y'all come." I said, "You go your way, I'll go mine." That's the end of my snake story. 13 minutes. I've got more coming. Catch you in a minute. Bye now.